Elu te'umis tenufa. The following menachos require tenufa. Ve'ein te'unis hagasha, but do not require hagasha. 1 second. I hope I'm on the right daf. Is today Samach Chalav or is today Samach Beis?
It's Samach Chalav.
It is Samach Chalav. Okay. I get confused because sometimes I'm a couple of days ahead. Okay. So ve'el tunis tenufa, ve'ein tunis hagasha. The following menachos require tenufa, but they do not require hagasha. So tenufa is that the kohen and the bayim lift it up and go to and fro and back and forth and up and down. And hagasha means they just took the mincha, the kohen took the mincha, and he brought it to the southwestern corner of the mizbeach. So zokt the Mishnah loik shemen shal mitzayra, the loik shemen of the mitzayra. So this is really continuing on from yesterday's Mishnah, which discussed the menachos that required hagasha and not tenufa. So now we're on to the next set is tenufa and not hagasha. The loik shemen of the mitzayra, the ashamai and the asham of the mitzayra. V'abikurim kediver Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov, and bikurim according to Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov, who the Gemara is going to explain who Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov is. The emurei shalmei yochid, and the emurim of a shlomim brought by an individual. The chazav v'shoik shalahen, and the chazav v'shoik of the shlomim. Echad. So the emurim go to the mizbeach. The chazav v'shoik goes to the kohen. Echad anoshim ve'echad noshim. Sai men and Sai women have this halacha of tenufa, be Yisrael v'loy b'acher. So that's a little bit of a stira. Be Yisrael v'loy b'acher is mashma be Yisrael and maybe not noshim. So the Gemara is going to focus on what does it mean echad anoshim v'echad noshim and then be Yisrael v'loy b'acher. Kishtei alechem is the two breads that are brought by Shavuos. Ushnei kivsei atzeres, along with the two shnifsei kivsei atzeres, they get tenufa together. How is it done? And this tenufa was one of the tenufas that were done on a live animal. So you take the shtei alechem and you put them onto the two sheep. So this is, we learned that the avodas kosher of Mikdash were kmitza and the zrika in the Kodesh Kodeshim. I want to know how many people could lift up two sheep with two breads on top of them and be moilech umevi mailu umayrid. That's a pretty challenging job. These kahanim must have been strong, but it was the bailam too. So noisin shtei alechem al gabi kvasim v'niach shtei adav.
I think they were lambs, weren't they? I mean, they're
lambs also weigh 2 lambs.
Yeah. But there's a point where Moshe had to do tenufa on Aaron and his sons.
That was also hard.
I think that would have been harder. How did they do that? Does he
That's the first
or?
Place in the Torah where a raise is mentioned. Aaron got a raise.
He got a raise.
Moshe gave him a raise.
I don't think he actually lifted them. I think he probably just moved them back and forth.
By Moshe and Aaron.
Yeah, Moshe to Aaron.
But this tenufa is literally lifting up the animal.
Yeah.
I don't know how much a lamb weighs. Mark, do you know how much a lamb weighs? I don't know. I'll have to ask Mary. Okay. Mary had a little lamb. Okay, so Dr. Gemara. This is the same motion of the nanuim that we make by a lulav. There's a lot of Torah about where this pattern comes from. So the pashat, the pshat is to show the Rabban Shalom is everywhere. But there are those who learn it's also connected golus and geula. So moilech is harchaka, so that represents golus. Maybe after the golus we're going to have a geula. Shenemar, it says in the pasuk asher hunaf v'asher huram. And from there we know this pattern. Now, how we see from this pasuk of Kasharhuna v'Chashuram is also a discussion. Even Rashi brings a couple of pshatim. So let's just see the pasuk inside. It says V'kidashta es chazei atnufa v'shoy katruma asher hunaf v'asher huram But what are we talking about here? Me'el hamiluim me'asher la'aron u'me'asher levanav. So this was actually, you're speaking about the tenuva that was done by the miluyim. And there doesn't seem to be a problem learning Ledayers from Shah, I guess, because we're not learning something that needs to be done. We're just learning what a Tenufa is. Where a Tenufa is required, that we're not learning from here. We're just learning that when a Tenufa is required, how is that Tenufa done? So let's quickly take a look at Rashi, where he says it. Ksiv v'hu v'heinif hakoyin oisam al lechem abikurim Tenufa. Should never be Maluyim. This is mentioned by the Maluyim. And it says Asher Hunaf Vasher Huram. Ula Ilmine, and even before that, it says in the Pasuk Sivei Nafta Oisam Tenufa. So there's multiple Tenufas mentioned by the Maluyim Gufa. Kal Hanit Tenufas Loimer Shemoilu Chamevi Mailu Morid. So that's the first shot in Rashi, how you see it from the Maluyim, because the mention of Tenufa comes many times to tell us that there were many motions. There were 4 motions. Lishna Chrina Mehuna Fahuram the Maluim Yalfina and Lashar Tnufais. It just says Huna Fahuram. From the Lashon Huna Fahuram, meaning it's the Lashon of Hanafa and the Lashon of Harama. That refers to the vertical motion as well as to the horizontal motion. Okay, Zog to Gemara weiter. So let me just repeat. I think when it says that's by the regular Tenufa. Then it says by Melum Hashun of Ashahuram, and it's multiple times. So we learn from the fact that it's redundant. The second lashon is just the lashon Hunaf and Huram. Okay, so Zok to Gemara weiter. Tenufa Hoisa b'Mizrach. Where did they do the Tenufa? On the east side of the Mizbeach. That means between the Mizbeach and the entrance. But Hagasha b'Mariv, Hagasha was done on the west corner of the Mizbeach, closer to the Heichal. Tenufais kaidmois lagashos. The Tenufa was always done before the Hagasha. And it actually makes sense because the Tenufa is done with the Bailam, right? The Hagasha is done by the Kohen by himself. Minchas ha'omer, the Minchas ha'omer that was brought on Pesach, or Minchas kanois of a Soiter, they require Tunis Hagasha u'Tenufa. They require Hagasha and Tenufa. Lechem aponim u'minchas nesachim ein teunus lo Hagasha v'lo Tenufa. Reb Shimon said there's another halacha. Gimel minim teunin gimel mitzvahs. There are 3 mitzvahs that we're going to discuss, and there's 3 korbanos that we're going to discuss, and each one between all 3 of these minim will need 3 mitzvahs done. But on each min, only 2 out of the 3 mitzvahs are done. So each one of these 3 minim omits one of the mitzvahs. Stein becholachas vachas. Each min has 2 mitzvahs. Ushlishus ein bahen. Ve'elohein. Now it'll become clear once we see what the Mishnah is clarifying itself with. Ve'elohein. Zivchei shalmei yachid. A shlomim that a yachid brings. V'zivchei shalmei tzibor, which are the kivsei atzeres. V'asham etzayra. So these are the 3 korbanos that we're talking about. Zivchei shalmei yachid te'unin semicha. They require semicha chayim while the animal's alive. Utenufa shchutin. And they also regular shlomim after it's shechted, they make tenufa on the emurim and the chaz of the shaykh. But the ein ban tenufa chayim. No tenufa is made on the shlomim animal when it's alive. So the 3 mitzvahs we're talking about are tenufa shchutin, tenufa chayim, and smicha. So the 2 that apply to zivchei shalmei tzibur yachid are smicha and tenufa shchutin. Zivchei shalmei tzibur te'unin tenufa chayim ushchutin. But there's shalmei tzibur, they did a tenufa on the kivsei atzeres before they shechted him, as we just saw earlier, and as well afterwards. But ve'ein ba smicha. There was no smicha done on the kivsei atzeres. V'hasham etzayra ton smicha and only tenufa chay ve'ein ba tenufa shachet. You don't need to do tenufa when it's shechted. Okay, so those are the different variations. what to do something or something else. Yeah, by the smicha, there's a discussion normally when you make a smicha on the carbon chatos, by the smicha, the bottom says vidui. Is there any nusach that's supposed to be said by the owner of the carbon by a shalomim? So there's the Chayim talk about it. Some people learn that when someone does smicha by a shalomim, he has to be meshavech to Rebbeinu Shalom. Tanu Rabbanim. It says in the pasuk, "V'hikriv oisei la'asham v'esloig hashemen." This is by the Taharis Hamatzera. V'heiniv oisan tenufa. So you're doing a tenufa malamed shetunin tenufa ke'echad. You need tenufa together, which we'll see what that means in a minute. But it's tenufa meaning the loig shemen and the carbon asham. Uminayin shem heiniv zeh ba'atzmai v'zeh ba'atzmai yatsa. How do you know if you didn't do them together? You made two separate tenufas, one of the like Shema and one of the Asham. You'll be yaitze. Talmud Leimer v'hikriv oisay la'asham v'heinif. Now let's look at the pasuk because this also is a little bit difficult to understand. So the pasuk says, "V'lakach hakoyin es hakev echad v'hikriv oisay la'asham v'esloig hashemen." This sounds very much like you have to make tenufa on both of them together. But the Gemara says, since it says v'hikriv oisoi la'asham loshin yachid, and then v'heinif loshin yachid, from there we learn that even one at a time you could make the tenufa on. Frag the Gemara, yachal yonif v'yachsev yonif. You might think that if you made tenufa and then you made the tenufa of the other item, you should do it again. Meaning, someone made, let's say, the tenufa of the animal, and then he was making the tenufa of the shemen. Maybe you should make the tenufa of the animal again with the shemen. Talmud Loimer tenufa v'loy tenufais. It's one tenufa per customer. Not multiple tenufas. So even though you did them individually, you don't have to repeat it to do it together. Lifnei Hashem. Zok Gemara, where is that? That's b'mizrach. For the Gemara, we always know that Lifnei Hashem means closer to the Heichal than the Mizbeach. So that's always on the west side. V'ya Amar Lifnei Hashem. V'ya Amar Lifnei Hashem Yachal b'mayrav. Amri Hanamili Mincha the Ikri Chatos. The only reason why Lefnei Hashem means b'mayrav by the Mincha is because the Mincha is referred to as a Chatos. The Torah refers to it as a Chatos. The Chatos Tuni Yisoid. You always have to spritz the dam of the Chatos on the Yisoid of Mizbeach. And we know that the Keren Droimis Mizrachis did not have a Yisoid. The Keren Droimis Mizrachis Lahaya Lo Yisoid. Aval Hacha Lefnei Hashem Karina Bay. So really it's Lefnei Hashem even if it's on the Mizrach side of the Mizbech. The only reason why we said that it has to be on the Ma'ariv side for the Mincha, that's because of a different issue, because it's similar to a Chatos. Okay, let's have a look at Rashi. Lefnei Hashem b'Mizrach, Kloimer afilu b'Mizrach, Karinin b'Nami Lefnei Hashem. I amrit b'Koy Mitzraba Gabe Agasha the Mincha Lefnei Hashem, that it has to be b'Ma'ariv. So that's Hanimili Mincha, the Ikri Chatos, T'chsiv Kodesh Kodeshim Hi Ka Chatos. The Chatos Tuni Yisoid, T'chsiv Ba V'Skol Adam Yishbach El Yisoid, and the Keren Droimis Mizrachis didn't have a Yisoid. There was just a little bit of a Yisoid on the south side of the Mizbech, and there was a little bit of a Yisoid on the east side of the Mizbech, but the southeast corner did not have a Yisoid, and we know for sure it has to be on the south corner because El Panei means when you're entering up to the Mizbech, and that's on the south side because the ramp or the entrance to the Mizbech was on the south side. Okay, gewaltig. Zok the Gemara weiter. So that answers us why a mincha, the Hagosh, has to be on the southwest corner, and the Tenufa could be on the southeast corner. Zok the Gemara, v'habikurim kediver Rebbe Elazar ben Yaakov. Bikurim also requires Tenufa, but that would be according to Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov. My Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov. Who is Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov that the Mishnah is saying Bikurim needs Tenufa according to Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov? Who is this? What is the Shita? The time we learned V'lokach hakoyin. So let's look at the Lashon HaPasuk by Bikurim. It says V'lokach hakoyin atena miyadecha. The kohen will take the basket of fruit of Bikurim from your hand. V'hinichai, and he will place it down l'fnei mizbach Hashem aleikecha. And then there's another pasuk that says Yodov Tiviena as Isi Hashem as a chelav. Okay, that's referring to the shlom. So we'll reference that pasuk shortly. So it says V'lokach hakoyin by Bikurim limit al habikurim shetaunin tenufa. That's how you need tenufa. Diver Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov. My time with Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov. Where do you see in this pasuk V'lokach hakoyin atena miyadecha? Where do you see anything about a tenufa there? The Teretz is Gomer Yad Yad Mishlomim. He learns Yad from the word Yad that's mentioned in Shlomim. And that's this pasuk. Yodov Tiviena es Ishi Hashem es a chelev hechaza yivienu es a chaza lahanif oiset tenufa lefnei Hashem. So when it says Yodov, it refers to the tenufa that was done under the Shlomim. So too when it says V'lokach hakoyin atena miyadecha, it's referring to tenufa. By the Korban Shlomim, Yodov Tiviena, his hand should bring it. So we learn Ma Kan Koin, just like by the Bikurim, it's the Koin who takes it, because it says Befesh V'lokach hakoyin hatena miyadecha. Afal Koin, so too when it says Yodov Tiviena, who's Tiviena? It means it's the Koin. And Umala Halon Bailam, Avkan Bailam, and just like by the Shlomim, it's the Bailam that does the Tenufa, so too by Bikurim, the Bailam do the Tenufa. Which means it's done together. How is it done? HaKetzad, Koyin Maniach Yodoi, Tachas Yad Bailim Umeinif. So the Bailam hold on to the basket that is making Tenufa on, and the Koyin puts his hands underneath the Bailam, and then they lift up together. Now this is a very interesting discussion that leads to some halacha l'maisa. So let's have a quick look at Tosfos. Doesn't literally mean that the kohen's hands are touching your hands and they're under your hands. Now you have a chatzitza. The kohen's not doing the avodah, he's not touching it because he's touching your hands. Lintfu kula b'hadadadi. The Gemara answered their kav chatzitza. So you see, there's a problem of chatzitza by tenufa. What's that? Why not? The Gemara asks that it is a chatzitza. Your hand is a chatzitza for somebody else. I'm sorry.
Someone else's hand.
Yeah. Ella habaylim. So what? So the Zok tells you now it's done. They could both have their hands on the keli, but not on the same part. The bailim hold the side of the keli from the handle, which would be further up. And the kohen will put his hands on the bottom of the keli. So when it says bailim, doesn't mean underneath his hands. It means on the keli lower at a lower height than the hands of the bailim. So the bailim could grab the keli from the side, and the kohen puts it on the bottom. And that's how Tosfos is going to verteich. What does it mean tachas yada bailim? When he got to when he's saying the Parshas HaBikurim, when he's presenting the Bikurim, when he says Arami Ovid Avi, he takes the basket off his shoulder. He holds the edge of the keli. So Tosfos brings a right from that Mishnah. The there is no problem. There's no problem if there's a chatzitza by the tenufa, and in fact, the hands of the kohen are directly under the hands of the Yisrael. The ikar tenufa b'bailami. The ikar tenufa is b'bailam. That's just how it's done. But the main avodah of tenufa is the bailam's responsibility, and the bailam is touching the keli directly. Frekt Rashi, frekt Tosfos the kasha. The minaleha. Where did Rashi get this from? That the main tenufa is bebailim. Hatavayu ksivan. They're both mentioned in the pasuk like we just learned. So how could Rashi suggest that the Kohen's tenufa isn't the primary one? From the Yerushalmi, it's mashmas just like Rashi, not like me. The Gasininga betnuvas minchas soita, by the minchas soita, it says the Kohen maniach yodai. And the Yerushalmi says, if any davar kir, it's not a problem of the Nigia, because maybe mapa v'nechaitzitz. Or either you put a shmat in between, or maybe kohen zaken, or you have an old kohen who he's not going to be aroused. V'afil tema yeled, by a saita where she's about to blow up, it's not exactly a mood that will ignite passion. And therefore, ein yetzara motzi loisasha. Now, according to Tosis, what's the problem? He's not touching her at all. He's putting his hands at the bottom, she's on the side. From here, it's very mashma that he's actually touching her hands. Could be, even though Tosis says my pshat could still be right, what's the concern over there? Because when two people are holding something together, it's likely that they're going to touch each other. Not because that's how it's structured. So actually, this leads to a very big shayla halacha, because Rav Moshe wrote a tshuva the day after Tisha B'av in the 70s. Someone asked him as Ashayla. He says, I travel to work by subway. And during rush hour, the subway is very, very crowded. And it's inevitable that I'm going to be banging into women. Do I have to incur the expense of taking a taxi, making my own way to work, or could I go on the public transportation, he doesn't write on the train, he writes on the subway, Samach Aleph Beis Vav Vav Yud. Okay, I take the subway, or the bus, Beis Aleph Samach. So Reb Moshe Paskins, that only derech chiba, there's a shayla v'dairaisa, but the Rambam holds that if you touch a woman derech chiba, if you touch an erva derech chiba, it's a dairaisa. But this is not derech chiba at all. This is b'chalal not derech chiba. You don't have to touch that person. It's just that, so long as you know you're not going to get carried away, Moshe, you absolutely do not have to spend the extra money to take a taxi. So then there's the shayla, but what about in the business meeting to shake a woman's hand? So we know Rabbi Lo, he says you're not allowed to, and Moshe says you're absolutely not allowed to in a meeting, because that's called derech chiba. Even if it's like just to say hello, to welcome, hello, how are you? That's chiba. Chiba doesn't have to mean with an erotic intention. It means it's to create friendship. It's to create bond. That's not allowed. That's Rabbi Moshe Paskins. But Rabbi Rosner quoted from the Debratina. So he would be yesterday, so I had time to listen to Rabbi Rosner. He quotes from the Debratina that derech chiba is not finishing up a business deal. If you're finishing up a business deal and you're shaking on a deal, that's not derech chiba. And I don't think Rabbi Moshe holds like that. But the Debratina held that's not called derech chiba. Derech chiba is only if it's to be friendly. So there's a shayla about it. But Rabbi Lo, I think said unequivocally, you're not supposed to. You know the famous story with there's a guy in our shul who was going to be meeting a woman in business who he never met before, but he knew that there was a Satmar Yid in Montreal that would meet this woman regularly to sell to her. So he called this guy up and he asked him, how do you deal with shaking? I don't want to insult her. She's a very important buyer. So this fellow says, I don't have a problem. What I do is before I meet anybody, I have my secretary call up front and let them know Mr. So-and-so does not shake. So don't be upset or insulted. He doesn't shake anybody's hands. So one day he's at a big show, and when he walks into the show, he sees that on one side of the room, this big hall where the show is, there's this woman there, and on the other side is this big Chassidish Yid with his whole entourage. And when she sees him, she says, Chaim! That's not his real name. Chaim, wow, it's so good to see you. And she runs over to him and she gives him a big hug. So this guy says, I see the guy's makbid not to shake. Hug is different. He just makbid not to shake. That's the story you're talking about? Oh, Zog to Gemara weiter. So I'll call upon him. Tosha says that when it's not derech chiba, it's not a problem, and that's why your Moshe held you're allowed to be on the subway, even though you could bang into somebody. Zok to Gemara weiter. Vilema nami kidive Rabbi Yehuda. Why are you saying that if you hold that you need tenufa by bikurim, it has to be going according to Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov? According to Rabbi Yehuda, also you have tenufa by bikurim. Titad Rabbi Yehuda Aimer v'hinachtoi zu tenufa. So where's the pasuk of v'hinachtoi? It says v'ata hine hevesi es reishis pri ha'adama asher nasata li Hashem v'hinachtoi lefnei Hashem alekecha. So he holds that v'hinachtoi is referring to tenufa. Ata Omer zu tenufa, you're going to say v'nachtos tenufa, oy einay alahanacha, maybe just means you put it down in front of the kohen. Zok the Gemara, keshu Omer v'hinicha, we've already learned the pasuk, v'lakacha kohen and telem yudecha, v'hinicha lefnei mizbech Hashem alekecha. So hinuach is already mentioned in the previous pasuk. So when it says v'hinachtoi, ma Omer, hamani mekayim v'hinachtoi zu tenufa, must be the tenufa. So for the Gemara, you see Rabbi Yehuda also holds this tenufa by bikurim. So why did the Mishnah say according to Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov it's tenufa? According to Rabbi Yehuda also. Amarava, two reasons. First of all, haylu pasach by a of tchila. Where did Rabbi Yehuda learn his tenufa from? From the second pasuk of bikurim, where it says v'nachtoi. Rabbi Yosy, Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov learned it out of the first pasuk because he used the word yad from Shlomim. So Vibalt he learned it from an earlier pasuk. Our Tana decided to quote him first. One reason why our Tana would have quoted Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov first, and Rabbi Nachman Yitzchak Amar Hoyel v'Rav Gavrei. Everybody knows that Mishnas Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov is Kavanoki. Everything he says is reliable and trustworthy. So therefore, the Mishnah, the Tana of our Mishnah, B'dafka quoted Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov because he's very trustworthy, and we know if he says that there's tenufa, there's definitely tenufa by Bikur. Zok to Mishnah Vayter, Ve'murei Shalma Yochid, V'chazav V'soik Shalahen, require a tenufa. Then the Mishnah says, Echot HaNoshim V'echad HaNoshim, and then it says something contradictory, B'Yisrael Avaloi B'acher. So Frek the Gemara, Maika Amar, what exactly does the Gemara mean? And Rashi clarifies, Reisha Katani Echad Noshim V'echad HaNoshim, V'hadar Katani Avaloi B'acherim, the Mashma Noshim V'loi Noshim. Right? B'Yisrael Avaloi B'acherim, it's mashma that a noshim is not included. My kamar, Amar Rabbi Yehuda Hachi kamar, Echad anoshim ve'echad noshim karbonim ton tenufa. Avada, the carbon of a woman needs tenufa. However, tenufa atzma b'Yisrael avaloi b'nei noshim. Now, who does the tenufa? The carbon requires tenufa. Who does the tenufa? So therefore, when it says echad hanoshim ve'echad hanoshim, means their carbon requires a tenufa. But who does the tenufa? Be Yisrael v'olei b'cherim, Yisrael v'lo Yisraelis. As Rashi says, the kohen will do the tenufa on the carbon that's brought by a woman on her behalf, but she does not do the tenufa. Tanu Rabbana, b'nei Yisrael manifin, ve'eino oivdei kechavim manifin. Goyim don't do tenufa. B'nei Yisrael manifim, ve'ein hanoshim manifais. And women don't do tenufa either. Amar Rabbi Yosy Matzinu shechilek hakasav ben carbon l'Yisrael l'carbon of the kechavim l'carbon noshim b'smicha. You see that there's a chilek between the carbon that's brought by a male Yisrael that requires smicha, that of a guy doesn't, and again that of a woman doesn't. You see, the Torah made that distinction, as Rashi says, the Tanya b'Torah's kanan b'reishei b'nei Yisrael. It says v'samach b'nei Yisrael, and we learn b'nei Yisrael soimchen ve'eina oivd kechavim soimchen. So the Tanya b'Torah's kanan b'reishei b'nei Yisrael v'samach b'nei Yisrael soimchen ve'eina oivd kechavim soimchen. B'nei Yisrael soimchen ve'eina Yisrael soimchen. So we know that they don't do smicha. Yochel nachlek b'tnufa. You might think that by tenufa as well, you should say that the carbon of a woman and the carbon of a guy do not require tenufa either. That's wrong. They do need tenufa. They do need tenufa. They don't need smicha, but they do need tenufa. Mali, why? What's the difference? Mali chalak b'smicha, shasmicha b'bailim. The reason why the Torah says smicha doesn't apply to the carbon of a woman or the carbon of a guy is because smicha has to be done b'dafka by the bailim, and it's not appropriate for the goy or for the isha to do smicha. But nachlek b'tenufa shatnufa b'kayhanim. But we can make the chiluk by tenufa because the tenufa is done by the kayhanim, and therefore we could say that the carbon of a woman requires tenufa, but it will be done by the kayhanim. As Rashi says, the mali chalak b'smicha klaimer tam yesh b'smicha shesmicha b'baylam atman kedarminan b'perk shtei midos yodoi v'lo yat shluchai hilchach oivdik chav menachim achas shemiyatan akosam milismoich ein b'karbon smichos. But nachot b'tnuva, the tnuva is b'kahanim v'chayil oivdik chav menachim lasas koin shliach. Sagt Gemara, but im kein ma'atamad loimer b'nei Yisrael. B'nei Yisrael manifin, ve'en oivdik chavim manifin. B'nei Yisrael manifin, ve'en manashim manifais. They themselves can't, but that doesn't mean that their carbon doesn't get the tenufa. As Rashi says, im kein the ton tenufa, ma'atam elomer b'nei Yisrael. We learn from b'nei Yisrael manifin, hey matman, ve'en nashim manifin, menatman elakoyin. So, you wonder why here we say it's to be ma'ad b'noisa. I don't know. I hear. I don't know the answer, right? Because many times it's Dabra b'nei Yisrael. So I don't know. But I guess, but here it's not. I don't know. I don't know why. So, but I'll call upon them here. All it's saying is that they cannot do the tenufa themselves, but that doesn't mean that their karbanos would not require tenufa, because their tenufa can be fulfilled through a coin. Zogt Gemara weiter. Tanyidach, B'nai Yisrael. Ein li ela B'nai Yisrael. What about Geirim, Avadim, Shuchrarim, Minayin? How do you know that they can do the tenufa by themselves? Minayin, Tamuloimer, Hamakriv. The pasuk says, who does it? It's the makriv, meaning the person bringing the carbon. Dabra b'nei Yisrael lemer hamakriv ezevach shlamav yovi es karboni l'shem mizevach shlamav. So the makriv pashas is the owner of the carbon. Oy einoi elo zeh koyin hamakriv. Maybe it's referring to the koyin, and maybe in fact that the ger and the eved meshucher shouldn't make the tenufa. Kishuomer yodav tiviena. That is for sure speaking about the bailam. Hari bailam amar. Ha ketzat koyin meniach yodov tachas habaylam umeiniv. So you have both. You need the tenufa from the koyin together with the tenufa of the owner. So that's how it's done. That the koyin puts his hands under the hands of the baylam umeiniv. I guess that's subject to the same shaila between Rashi and Tosfos. What means tachas yad habaylam? Rashi is literally under the hands of the baylam, and Tosfos says a little bit lower on the keli. Zok to Gemara weiter. Ketzad yaseh. What do you do? So Rashi says, "Ketzad, yiskaimu hamakriv dainu koyin v'yoda of teviyanu dainu bailam." Right, this is going on. Hear it. Heicha achchan lechem, the lechem that's also before. So we're in the middle here. Ketzad oisa manich imurin al pisas hayad, because we're talking over here about how is the tenufa done on the shlomim, because on the shlomim they did tenufa on two things. They did it on the imurid that was going to be placed on the mizbeach, but they also did it on the chaz of a shoik. So the way it was done is maniach imurin al pisas hayad, on the hands of the bailam they would put the imurim, then the chaz of a shoik aleihen, and then they would put the chaz of a shoik on top of the imurim, and that's how they did it. And the chomokim sheish lechem, any carbon that has lechem involved, halechem ilamaylo, the lechem would be on top of the meat. Heicha. So Rashi says over here, Heicha ashkan lechem, the lechem l'mayla. Where do you see a limud that the lechem is always on top of the meat, like by the kivsei etzeres? Amar papa b'miluyim my taima. By miluyim, what's the reason? So miluyim says misala matzos asher lefnei Hashem ad vayosem ala chalavim v'lashoik. So it says that the breads were on top. Was on top of the meat, so we learn it from Miluyim. So my Papa b'Miluyim, we learn from the Miluyim that the bread has to be on top of the meat. Now the Gemara is switching gears. My timer Rashi says a different shaila. My timer Amrinon the Mani Chazav V'Shoik Al Alimurin. So we were going back and forth. First we talked about why is the bread on top of the meat. Now Gemara wants to know but in Shlomim we say that the Chaz of Shaik is on top of the Emurim. Why? Why don't you put the Emurim on top of the Chaz of Shaik? So mishum dechsiv Shaik hateruma v'chazei hatnufa al ishei hachalovim yaviu lahanav tenufa, which is much more that the Shaik hatruma, the chazei tuva, is on top of the chalovim. But the problem is v'ksiv es hachelev ala chaza yivienu. But there's another pasuk that says that the chelev goes on top of the chaza. So the question is, how do you know that the chaza of shaykh is on top? Maybe the chelev should go on top. Or mabaye, this is how it works. Hauda ma'isele koyin mibeis hamit b'chaim. The koyin has to transfer, one koyin has to transfer the meat from the butchering area, which is to the north of the mizbeach. He has to bring it over to the keves, to the wrap. So the kohen, he loads it up, and he loads it up. So the way it works is, when it says that the chalev should be on the chazer, that's talking about the guy delivering it. So you see the guy is delivering it, he has the chazer on the bottom, and the emurim on top. When he transfers it over to the next kohen, so he transfers over first the emurim and then the chaz of a shaykh. So therefore, by the second kohen, it ends up that the chaz of a shaykh is on top and the emurim are on the bottom. So they transferred over a little bit. They didn't take the whole package. First, he took the thing on top. Because there's a third kohen that was transferring. So zog to Gemara, how do my hamid b'chaim? That's where you have the emurim on top and the chaz of a shaykh on the bottom for Ramilei. It says, "Vayasimu es hachalovim ala chazos." Once again, it says the chalev is on the chazah. Because then it gets transferred again. So when it comes from the butchering area to the kohen that was going to do the tenufa, it came with the emurim on top, the fats on top. When he transferred it over to the kohen who was doing the tenufa, the fats went on the bottom and the chaz of shaykh went on top. And then when the kohen who did the tenufa passed it to the kohen who's going to take it up to the mizbeach, once again, the emurim, the chaz of shaykh went on the bottom and the emurim went on top. You know what you see from here? You need 3 koyanim to do this. Why couldn't one kohen do the whole thing? Bring it all the way, do it, never bring it up. The teretz is mishum dechsiv v'roiv am hadras melech. We want to try to break up the tasks in the Beis Hamikdash as small as possible and include as many people as possible, and that's why there was all these transfers of the meat.
That mean they flip it over or what?
I'm not sure if he flips it over because Domi was asking that, or if you have someone doing the transfer. So if you're holding the chaz b'shoik on the bottom and the more on top, and someone transfers it over to the next guy, it ends up being upside down. This is where we know that by Tish they take the piece of fish that's the shrine from the Rebbe, pass it from hand to hand to hand to hand until you get it. It's also beroiv am hadras melech, like in the Beis Hamikdash. Okay, let's stop here. Ik wens het ook.
Good.